Today we are here with Dr. Carlos Tirado. Dr. Tirado specializes in the treatment of people with chronic drug and alcohol addiction. Welcome, Dr. Tirado.
It's great to be here.
Doctor, tell us more about your experience dealing with addicts and some of the illnesses that are common among people who abuse drugs and alcohol.
Well, drug and alcohol users are at risk for a variety of serious illnesses, not only infectious diseases, but also long-term consequences of their drug and alcohol use.
Are people who are abusing or addicted to drugs at greater risk of developing a life-threatening problem?
Absolutely. We know that drinking alcohol and using drugs impairs your judgment and your thinking. Okay? We not only know from our personal experience that that's true, but the science really backs this up. We know that alcohol and drugs of abuse affect parts of the brain that control your emotions, they control your memory, and it controls your judgment based upon the different parts of the brain where drugs and alcohol affect you. So anything that impairs the way you think and the way you perceive your reality in your world can impair your judgment and your behavior and make you more likely to engage in high-risk activity.
High-risk activity?
Yeah, high-risk activity is any kind of activity that causes direct harm to you or others.
What are some examples of high-risk behavior?
Well, you know, there are a lot of them, but in the people that I treat, typically people with drug and alcohol problems, the most common ones that I see are things like injecting or sharing needles to use drugs, unsafe or unprotected sex, having multiple sexual partners, or, for instance, getting behind the wheel of a car while intoxicated is one of the big ones that we see all the time.
Since we're here to talk about medical diseases related to drug and alcohol abuse, what are some of the biggest health threats to people with a drug and alcohol problem?
Well, there are many. Back in 2004, in the March issue of the Journal of the American Medical Association, there was a really interesting study published called The Actual Causes of Death in the United States. And what that study was about was showing what the relationship between substance abuse and alcohol abuse, so let's say nicotine, alcohol, and other drugs are, to causing actual illnesses in our population. And what that study found was striking. Diseases related to tobacco, to alcohol, and illicit drugs were actually the first, third, and ninth leading causes of death in the United States. So there's no question that diseases that are caused by substance abuse are huge killers in the United States.
Aside from infectious and sexually transmitted diseases, what other health problems do alcohol and drug users frequently face?
As we had mentioned before, problems that are related to the toxicity of the drug, right? So chronic use of alcohol will start causing damage to different tissues in the body, the liver, the pancreas, the central nervous system. Chronic use of other substances like nicotine, the smoke of tobacco will cause all kinds of different body systems to start wearing down. So it really depends on the substance itself. What is the direct toxic effect of the substance on the body? And that determines then what the long-term consequences are of exposure to that drug. There are some specific levels of drinking for alcohol that are predictive of having lifelong problems. So, for instance, the National Institutes on Alcoholism and Alcohol Abuse say that for men, if you drink 5 or more drinks at a sitting or 14 or more drinks in a week, that increases your risk of developing alcoholism. And for women, it's 4 or more drinks at a sitting or 8 or more drinks in a week. And both men and women increase your likelihood of developing alcoholism by 7 times, according to most estimates. So if you find that you're drinking at that level, the important thing to realize is that that is associated with an unhealthy level of drinking, okay? And seek some kind of advice or support from a medical professional or someone specializing in handling these problems. As far as long-term consequences, depending on the drug of abuse and the way in which the drug is used, often is associated with what types of health problems you could have. So we know, for instance, that smoking cigarettes, right, long-term, is associated with all kinds of health problems: lung cancer, emphysema, circulatory problems, heart problems, strokes, right? Alcohol has its own cluster of problems too. One of the most common and severe is liver failure. but we also know that alcohol drinking attacks the pancreas, can also impact the nervous system, and it can cause a variety of psychological and psychiatric problems that we've probably seen in people or in the media. Earlier in our talk, we talked about the leading causes of death in the United States, and I had mentioned that diseases related to tobacco smoking are in fact the #1 killers of people in the United States. So even though a lot of people watching this interview may not be watching it to learn more about their tobacco problem, okay, there's no question that nicotine dependence is an addiction. Okay, so nicotine dependence is a real addiction, and it's an addiction that leads to the most common serious diseases and causes of death in our country. Okay, so just to kind of put this in perspective, if you take an alcoholic, okay, who has the disease of alcoholism, that alcoholic is more likely to die of a tobacco-related illness than they even are of an alcohol-related illness. So it's just very important to understand that if you are a person who has a nicotine dependence problem, getting help for that problem may be the most important positive health choice that you make in your entire life.
It is a drug addiction.
It's the worst drug addiction.